Social Injustices, more specifically, Gender Equality by Hope Engel. The history of gender equality. Gender equality issues have been going on since the late 1800s. Women have historically been treated inferior to men. Whether related to voting rights, equal pay, or just basic human rights, women have always had to fight to be seen and heard. There were many fights about women's voting rights in the late 1800s and early 1900s, when women were gathering together to show that they were equal to men and should be allowed to vote. One of the first large gatherings with women and men who believed women should vote was the Seneca Falls Convention. This convention was the very beginning of the women's suffrage movement. Gender equality is a social justice issue because we are told that everyone is created equally. However, women were not being treated equally. All of the events that have happened in the past 170 years show that the fight for gender equality continues. A major advance for women occurred with the Equal Pay Act of 1963. This is a United States labor law amending the Fair Labor Standards Act, which aimed at abolishing wage disparity based on sex. It was signed into law on June 10, 1963, by John F. Kennedy as part of his New Frontier program. Unfortunately, with this seemingly positive law, there is a heavy burden on the plaintiff to successfully prove gender discrimination in the workplace. This issue is very important to me because as a young adult woman, I will soon be living and working in a world where I hope women will be treated equally. Women should be able to have equal pay when it comes to the workplace. Women should be respected for all the hard work that we put into our careers, and women's votes should have equal importance as men's votes do. Lesser v. Garnett. While the 19th Amendment was ratified on August 26, 1920, the constitutionality of it was challenged. Lesser v. Garnett was one of the first to challenge this amendment. In 1922, Cecilia Street Walter and Mary D. Randolph tried to register to vote in the state of Maryland, where only men were allowed to vote. Local lawyer Oscar Lesser and other men sued the state voter registry on two grounds: that the 19th Amendment had not been ratified in the state constitution, and the amendment had not been ratified by 3/4 of all states. The case went to the Supreme Court, where it ruled unanimously that women had the right to vote, as the 19th Amendment had been ratified in 36 states and therefore had all the intents and purposes of the Constitution. It also invalidated the other states who had similar restrictions, such as Tennessee and Virginia. The state of Maryland would not finally certify the 19th Amendment until 1958. Ledbetter v. Goodyear. This case from 2006 was a turning point in equal pay for women and the statute of limitations. Lily Ledbetter, a supervisor at a Goodyear factory in Gadsden, Alabama, worked for 19 years with low rankings in annual performance and salary reviews. She also received low raises compared to other employees. She believed this was due to gender discrimination by her employer. In sworn testimony, she stated that she learned about the difference in her pay by someone leaving her an anonymous note. She also testified that she told her supervisor back in 1995 that she was aware that her peers were making $1,000 more per month than she was. She sued Goodyear, which resulted in the case going all the way to the Supreme Court. The court originally ruled in favor of Ledbetter, granting her $3,600,000 in back pay and damages. Goodyear appealed the case due to a Title VII provision that requires discrimination complaints to be made within 180 days of the employer's discriminatory conduct. Following this appeal, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Goodyear due to the statute of limitations. While Lily lost her case, Congress later increased the statute of limitations when it applies to equal pay from 180 days to within 2 years of the most recent discriminatory paycheck. This helps any future lawsuits regarding equal pay for women. Progress for Lesser v. Garnett. The result from this case was that in the court, it was shown that women do in fact have the right to vote from the 19th Amendment. I agree with this decision because women over the age of 18 should be able to vote and make decisions about the country that they live in. While men and women share the right to vote, women still do not have full equality as compared to men. Fewer than 100 years ago, women had no rights. Now, in 2020, women are still having to fight for our rights. The result from this case, Ledbetter v. Goodyear that is, was that for future cases, there will be much longer time limit to discover discrimination in pay. As a result of this case, former President Barack Obama signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, which states that the 180-day statute of limitations for filing an equal pay lawsuit regarding pay discrimination resets with each new paycheck affected by the discriminatory action. I agree that this is a start in the right direction for women's equal pay rights. If men and women are doing the exact same job, why should women get paid less? To solve the problem of equal pay, the government needs to not only require that companies pay their female workers the same as their male workers, but make it easier for them to prove. Income is frequently a private issue, therefore this type of discrimination is difficult to prove unless more women come forward. This law is a step in the right direction. Conclusion for Lesser v. Garnett. This case is related to the novel A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest Gaines, because both the case and the novel focus on injustice. The book focuses on racism towards African Americans. Although black men obtained the right to vote from the 15th Amendment in 1870, in 1947, only 12% of black men were eligible to vote in the South. The book takes place in a very similar place, the South, during 1948. Women of color, however, were not included in this statistic because they were not able to vote until 1965, 43 years after Lesser v. Garnett. The right to vote is important because it gives all humans a voice in what happens in the country or state that they live in. Without the right to vote, we would have no say in what happens to our homes and families. The case and book have taught me that although we are all equal and created as one, women, and especially women of color, had a long fight for the right to participate in the decisions that are made for our country's well-being. Conclusion for Ledbetter v. Goodyear. While it is harder to connect the book to the second case, they both have a component involving time constraints. In Ledbetter v. Goodyear, the court ruled that Miss Ledbetter had filed her case too late after the discrimination had occurred. In the novel, the narrator says, "They sentence you to death because you were at the wrong place at the wrong time, with no proof that you had anything at all to do with the crime, other than being there when it happened. Yet 6 months later, they come and unlock your cage and tell you, we, us, white folks all, have decided it's time for you to die, because this is a convenient date and time." The justice system is all about time limits in regard to when the event happens. However, if the time limit is not reasonable, and it determines the outcome of one's life, does it really make it justifiable? Our country was founded on the fact that in the court of law, everyone will be tried justly. This has taught me that time constraints also affect the way justice is served.